Привіт. I'm Chokolenik, a Ukrainian-American, baptized with the name Yaroslav. That's the name I use in the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I'm known as Yaroslav the Persistent, or Yari. I have been putting together videos on Slavic folklore and mythology and Slavic culture and Slavic history in order to foster an interest in that area within the society. And hoping these videos might be a starting point for someone interested in, developing a persona, or even just because they have an interest in that part of the world. So one of the things I've really been getting into is folklore and mythology, and wading through all these different versions of different stories, and tracking down different aliases of characters. And something I ran into a few days ago was a reference to the Rye Baba. Okay, what's this? Is this kind of like a Baba Yaga thing? Because there's a bunch of different names for Baba Yaga. And then I found a couple of other articles, and I decided I needed to dig deeper. When I read, air quotes, in fact, she had many names, and gave Rye Baba and Baba with iron teeth, I assumed, okay, she's a variant, one of the many versions of Baba Yaga out there. But I think this is a case of a couple of different characters of folklore being jumbled together, or Baba being applied to any female figure. Okay, quick review. Baba Yaga, she's an enigmatic or ambiguous character from Slavic folklore, which is the subject of this channel. Or she's one of a trio of sisters of the same name, which probably adds to confusion. And she's got opposite roles. In some motifs, she's described as repulsive or ferocious looking and old, and she eats children. And in others, she's still old, but she's a nice old woman who helps out the hero. And she's often associated with forest life. And that thing about forest life, hey, it's because she lives deep in the forest in a hut standing on chicken legs, real distinctive feature. And she also flies around on a wooden mortar, wielding a pestle and a broom behind her and kind of covering her tracks. The name Baba is common enough. Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, grandmother, or old woman. And in Slavic lore, adding Baba to a name kind of implies the character is an old woman of some type. In Western Slavic lands, you'll see the name Rye Baba. In Poland specifically, Yezda. In the Balkans, Gwozdzenzuba, Iron Tooth. All right, Baba Yaga variants. Then there were wildly different descriptions of Rye Baba. A beautiful young woman, extremely thin woman with a wreath on her head and a sickle in her hand. Or a clumsy old woman dressed in rags. Or a skeleton character with long, uncombed hair. The consistent parts of the description, the Rye Baba was always a woman, always carried a sickle in her hand, and a bag for kidnapped children on her back, kind of like Krampus. Then there's the origin story, which kind of makes her sound like a supervillain or a superhero. The origin story sounds a lot like it's a borrowing from the Rusalka origin. It was believed that women who died in engagement or shortly after marriage and did not have time to enjoy the role of mother and wife became Rye Baba, or Rye Grandma. And it was anger that transformed them into this monster who showed no mercy. One sign of her approach was to see a whirlwind moving the grain. Okay, then there were other parts of the description that really had me questioning what I was reading and what was going on. The Rye Baba would appear in the fields at the hottest part of the day. I've heard of someone who does that. And she would appear to those working at this time and she would fall upon them. Well, that sounds a lot like the Poludnitsa, called Lady Midday or the Noon Wraith or the Noon Witch. She makes herself evident in the middle of hot summer days, sometimes taking the form of whirling dust clouds, but usually appearing as a young woman, dressed in white, often with dark hair, and maybe cornflowers woven into her hair, roaming the fields at the peak of the heat of the day, carrying a scythe, a sickle, or shears. The Poludnitsa, she'd attack those working in the heat of the day, like when it's really super hot. Here you are, you're out there working. Well, she's going to view that as a sign of disrespect, and she's going to maybe whisper and make you go to sleep, or cause heat stroke, or pain in your neck, or cause madness, or she just might cut off your head with the sickle. Right? Any human who dares to upset her traditional visit risks his health and his life. Poludnitsa makes children disappear when they search for cornflowers. Remember that wreath in her hair. In amongst the tall grain plants on hot summer days, and she makes them dance non-stop until evening. And her function was she was useful for scaring children away from the valuable crops. In Western Slavic lands, she might be called the Lady of the Rye or the Cornflower Wraith. But nowhere in the different sources on the Poludnitsa is there a reference to iron teeth or eating children. And that's where I'm thinking that this is just a case of the two characters, Baba Yaga and the Poludnitsa, who was a field spirit or meadow spirit, coming together. Or it might also just be a misinterpretation of a translation. So, that was just a weird little exercise in, trying to tell apart the different stories. Until the next time, do pobачення.